Hi guys, thank you very much for coming over. We're gonna be streaming this also online. I'm just here to introduce Tom and his experience on the hike and fly competitions he participated and the X RedRocks. Greg is not here to introduce because he's been sick today, and I think a lot of us got stuck in the highway. So hopefully everybody gonna see you online. Come on over. Thank you.
Is this thing on? Oh, there we go. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, I guess last time I saw you all was presenting on a time I crashed in a tree about a year ago. So I've had quite the ascendancy from then to presenting about a hike and fly competition I was in. But yeah, so anyway, if you want to go to the next slide there. Yeah, so in this chat, I guess going to be covering a bunch of things around what my experience was in the race. I guess it's a little bit better late than never. It was over a year ago now. But yeah, just really talking about things that I've been asked questions about since I did the race, which is really, you know, is this the right kind of thing for you? What does hike and fly competition involve? Is it something that you're ready for? Do you have the experience or capability for it? What kind of specialist equipment do you need? Some key things to think about when preparing for the race, and also some tips and lessons learned that I found during the race. So throughout I'll be sort of sprinkling a few stories and anecdotes through, and yeah, sharing some pearls of wisdom that I garnered from other people along the way. So anyway, next one there, Jeremy. So is this your kind of fun? I guess, yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun in a lot of different ways, and the definition of fun can be quite varied. So they weren't my feet, by the way, but foot management or footwear management is a definitely pretty big part of hike and fly racing, as we'll be covering later. Second photo there, actually not my photo. That's courtesy of Mr. Mark Herbison. I think he was in airspace there. But yeah, anyway, the hills are pretty high too, so it's hard to tell. And then at the start gate on the left there or on the right for you guys, with all the pros. So, yeah, there's a little video. Is this your kind of thing? Hopefully this next little video is going to give you a bit of an idea. And sorry in advance, you got to learn a few things from this, and one of the key things you'll learn is I'm not very good at taking videos or capturing content. So if I had hung on for another, goddamn, like half an hour, I think I would have been good. Little cues popping all over the place. Yet here I am, dashing the bush. In some beautiful desert. Whew. Oh, this is not bad though. Currently looking like I'm neck and neck with two other guys, which who'd want it any other way. Woo! So yeah, that was on day 2 where I'd elected to fly when everyone else decided to run 65 kilometers, and I was kind of like, hell no, I'm not going to run with a pack on for 65k along the road. So I elected to try and fly, and it worked out absolutely amazingly, and ended up flying 45 of the 65k and landed basically neck and neck with the two next leaders and had a race to the finish. So that's the kind of thing that can be pretty exciting about this, is, you know, there's so much flexibility in choosing your routes and being able to sort of control your destiny, and I guess, you know, try creative things and explore different places. So yeah, one of the real attractants to me. If you want to go to the next slide there, Jeremy. So yeah, some of the things to consider whether this is the kind of thing for you if you're thinking about it. Now, I guess actually a question to everyone else here that I meant to ask at the start. Actually, show of hands, who's done hike and fly before? Just normal hike and fly. Yeah, quite a lot of people. Who's done a hike and fly competition? Absolutely no one. Who is curious or thinking about doing a hike and fly competition in future? Oh yeah, there's 1, 2 people there. Okay, sweet. Well, maybe we can turn that around a little bit. Maybe not. It's definitely a lot of Type 2 fun. They say hike and fly, but the general joke is there's hike and fly. But it makes the flying part of it oh so enjoyable when you know that you're cruising over everyone else when they're slamming it out on the ground. So there's also a lot of formats of hike and fly comps. You know, everyone's probably familiar with the sort of big name ones like the XPER and X Alps, which are like multi-day, hundreds of kilometers, and basically just a race from A to B over several days. However, over the last few years, there's been a few different formats come up. You'll see here on the screen, there's a couple of screenshots of different types. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically the one on the top there is actually a waypoint map from a race called the Hatcher Hike and Fly Race in Alaska that's been going for the last couple of years, which is quite a chill format. Basically, you have 3 days to tag as many of those turn points as possible by hiking or flying, and you get extra points for hanging out with other people and for vol-biving out, camping with other people, camping at certain huts, that kind of thing. So it's very much centered around basically having an adventure, choosing your own adventure, and hanging out with other people at the same time, which is a pretty cool idea. And then this screenshot at the bottom is very much more like stage race stuff. Basically, that's a screenshot from one of the tasks in the X RedRocks for the adventure division, which was about 70 or 80 kilometers. And it's just like any other paragliding competition. So the advantage of that is definitely that everyone's starting, like a normal comp, starting in the same place and ending in the same place every day. And, again, you're, usually going, racing with other people at the same, along the same kind of route. In terms of locations, I'll be talking a little bit about this more later. Some exciting news about some hike and fly competitions are coming to our shores in 2025. But also, as I mentioned, there's a race in Alaska, and there's also the X RedRocks, which is 3 hours south of Salt Lake City in Utah. So in terms of the levels of competition, of course, caters to a lot. Hike and fly comps do cater to a lot of different types of experience and different kind of vibes. There's in the X RedRocks in particular, there's 3 different divisions from, I think, like a novice division, a sort of intermediate division, and then a pro division. And there's really a lot of, I guess, emphasis on passing on knowledge, especially in the novice and intermediate ones, where they organise talks with from the pros to share their experience and really pass on knowledge down to newer pilots and rookies like myself. And the exposure to world-class pilots, that's a pretty big one. You're getting to hang out with Aaron Duragatti and Pal Tackett's and, all these guys who are racing the X Alps and have, thousands and thousands of hours and have a lot of pretty cool stories and pretty cool experience to pass on. Now, I guess also do want to mention risk management, also definitely a part of considerations of whether this is the type of comp for you. These competitions generally don't like to talk about people getting injured. I guess, for example, someone got pretty badly injured in the X RedRocks in 2024, and I didn't really see that being talked about at all on the sort of advertisements or in the social media that they had out. So it's definitely something to consider, but ultimately it comes down to what your approach is to it, and if you've got a strong basis in sound decision making around around risks and, not bringing too much ego into it. So anyway, next slide on there, Jeremy. So I guess if you're deciding if hike and fly competition's for you and you're pretty keen to give it a go, I guess the next question is, are you ready for it? So, there's a few factors to consider there. In terms of the level of fitness, it's definitely going to be much more enjoyable if you've got a reasonable base level of fitness. I'd say it doesn't need to be extraordinary, but if you can run 10 or 15k, and if you're used to going on multi-day hikes, going backpacking or whatever, then you're probably at a base level of fitness that you need. So there is a pretty wide range in these competitions. In the division I was in the 23 X RedRocks, there were a couple guys who are into ultra marathon who, I think the guy who won it ran 140k over the entire race, over the 3 days. So there are some absolute monsters on the ground, but ultimately, it's not all about the winning. By far the best thing I personally got from this was just the experience and hanging out with like-minded people, seeing some absolutely incredible scenery, and confronting some pretty interesting challenges, and using your skills and experience to make it work. So going on to experience and currency, there's, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of different levels of in these competitions. Usually, in terms of you can enter novice divisions that don't require generally have much shorter tasks. There's not always a expectation that you're going to be doing 100k XCs on every day or on every flight. So they really can be tailored to what your level of comfortability is. Really the biggest thing in terms of experience and currency is having solid ground handling skills, having solid launch and landing skills, and being comfortable with backcountry travel and navigation. That's sort of a pretty key thing. And if you're into ski touring or into, again, hiking, backcountry hiking, then you've probably got the skills you need. Money's a consideration as well, as with any comp. I think for me it ended up costing about $2 or $3 grand by the time you pay. The entry fees are usually pretty cheap. I think the X RedRocks now is $300 or $400 for a 4-day event. But then you've got to consider that you've got a day either side, you've got 6 days of accommodation, all of that stacks up, so it's not insignificant. Things that you don't need, definitely don't need to be going for the for 7 kilo gear setup and an X Alp swing and all that kind of stuff. Definitely saw a bit of that in terms of guys rocking around with super hot gear that and they didn't fly at all during the race. So ultimately, it's I did this race with just all my normal flying gear and had no problems with it. If you want to chuck to the next slide there.
There's a question on the group here.
Oh yeah.
How did you find the altitude effect compared here as far as your ability to move fast on foot?
Oh, that's a great question, actually. So the question that Pedro had there was around altitude. Actually, do you just want to hold on?
How did you find the altitude effect compared to here as far as your ability to move fast on foot?
Yes, that's a great point. And all the accents. Yeah, it's a great question. So, that part of Utah is pretty high. I think the top of the mountains was around 10 to 11,000 feet. Or might have been, it was 10 to 11,000 feet. And then, the flying on the 2024 X RedRocks, a lot of guys were getting up to 18,000 feet on their flights. So, you can get pretty high, and particularly when flying, and also, even the valley bottoms are at, quite high altitude. Personally, I didn't actually notice I didn't notice I slowed down a whole bunch, but I think it definitely did affect me. I actually got bleeding noses a couple of times, which is probably from the altitude or something. But yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I wouldn't say high altitude training particularly is required, but in hindsight, I'd probably put a bit more effort myself into fitness before the race to, yeah, be prepared for that. Obviously, with the altitude, hypoxia is definitely something to consider when flying, especially if you've just gone and absolutely busted yourself climbing up a hill. You're already out of breath, and then you're making complex flying decisions. Something we should always be thinking about, and in particular important for this race, and also possibly one of the reasons why I made a mistake on my first day. So yeah, in terms of equipment, obviously not me. Thanks to who was that in that photo? Tom DeDorlado, of course. I just got that off online. I didn't actually take any photos of my gear, but it's basically the same stuff. Probably don't need the fly fishing rod or the Kindle or the Red Bull. I guess comes down to taste. Camera is actually a thing that I would mention, I guess, for anyone in my situation, which is someone with like 200 or 300 hours looking at doing competition. You'll probably notice throughout this that all of my photos and videos are from when I'm running and walking. I didn't do anything in the air or when I was getting ready to launch to do with recording what I was doing, because I feel that you're already having to make enough consequential decisions when you're racing. If you're screwing around with a camera, probably not ideal. In terms of wing choice, honestly, I probably would have done just as well if I was flying my old Buzz, as I was on a Mentor 7 Lite high B wing. But yeah, it really, these comps, like especially if you're in like the novice or intermediate classes, you're only expected to fly 30, 40, 50k at the most, and quite often people will bomb out just because they've chosen crappy places to launch, or they've like rushed. Rushing is a massive thing there. The actual wing choice doesn't make a big difference. Saw guys stepping up to hotter wings for races like this, and again, you're like putting yourself in a situation where you're probably a bit more exhausted from running up a hill. You may be flying in conditions that are more serious than what you'd normally fly in. And then on top of that, you're flying potentially a spicier bit of gear than you're used to. So, there we go. So I'm not going to go through everything, but harness, and I guess the whole thing here is like making things as simple as possible. I had harness that had inflatable back protection, and I forgot to blow it up on one of my launches, which was a really, really shitty feeling, because I was like flying out of a gully that, I was like not in a great, I'd made a bad decision, had to slope land, had to hike back up a hill, took off, I was a bit flustered, forgot to blow my back protection up, and now I'm flying in like, a not inconsequential flight without back protection. So again, just a thing of like, lighter is not always better. Jeremy.
Hey Tom, there are a couple questions from Duck Raised by Chickens. What kind of underwear do you recommend? And the second one is, how about top landing at high elevation?
With underwear, can give some very specific recommendations. Separatech makes some fantastic underwear. Usually less fabric is better. So, if you've got your favorite G-string or whatever, it's also a lot lighter. It's a lot cheaper to go light on underwear than it is to go light on a wing. So, yeah. Great question, Duck with Chickens, whatever your name is. and top landing. Hey, I'm really glad someone brought that up. So, oh, is it the same person? Yeah, so top landing, obviously pretty, one of the riskier things that we do in paragliding, and not something, well, I guess I elected to slope land once, but definitely tried to avoid situations like that wherever possible. Yeah, I had, I think, 4 total flights in 3 days, and I had 1 slope landing when I bombed out. But yeah, top landing at altitude, definitely a high risk situation. And in the conditions I was in, where you're dealing with Utah does, even in September, it is very hot on the ground. You're getting, depending on the conditions that you strike that particular year, can be very strong thermals. So high winds, strong thermals, and high altitude, definitely not something I'd be trying to do. Again, it comes down to, with these races, like, you're not racing for anything in particular other than having an adventure. So, I think, some people did do it. I did it once, but definitely, I wouldn't be doing a whole bunch of it or planning to do that. Having some top landing skills, having said that, or having practiced that somewhat, would be like a good thing to have in terms of a backup, or in terms of in terms of safety. I guess you don't want to be trying to top land for your first time in a race. Just getting back to equipment. Gaiters, super important. That was one thing that a lot of people didn't have, and they suffered like hell, because if you're ever walking through sagebush or walking through long grass, getting crap down in your shoes, and it just makes the whole thing pretty unpleasant. Footwear, that's a massive one, just in terms of foot management. Just having shoes that you could theoretically run 30k in. That's what James Elliott said. He recommended I go and run 30k in the shoes that I bought. I definitely did not run 30k in them, and I found out that they did not fit perfectly. So the advice is, run 30k in your shoes before you use them in a race, and they should be sweet as long as you can do that. Those weird 5-finger sock things also stop blisters. Big part of it. First aid kit. So experience from the 24 race. Definitely of having a chat to some people. Definitely want to have a basic first aid kit, particularly with a tourniquet. If you end up crashing or having a nasty landing somewhere, that could save your life. So a lot of these races do have medical people around, but that's I guess the case with any paragliding. If you're flying XC, you want to have some means to be able to save your own life, and tourniquets can do that. In terms of food, I guess just not trying stuff out. I guess this is just a typical rule for any endurance racing, is like, don't try new food out on the day of the race, because your body might not agree with it. I had a 3-litre water bladder, and that wasn't enough on some days. Hiking pole, super important. One of the ex-Alps athletes guys busted his pole on the first hike of the first day, and he suffered a bit. Mentioned the cameras stuff, and offline mapping apps, super important to be familiar with them. Right on, next slide. And race preparation. So this is my race preparation, also taken from the last presentation. I went a little bit hard on the race preparation stuff with flying. In terms of running and hiking pace, so just basically getting a feel for what kind of pace you can handle, and recording that, and then making sure during the race you don't absolutely blow yourself out. I had a little smartwatch thing, but I guess whatever you can do to figure out what a comfortable pace is for you, that's pretty important for a long race, and making sure you can do it over multiple days. If you want to check on video 9, if that's... Can't even remember what I put on here. I guess we'll all find out together.
In the meantime, there's another question.
Oh yeah, another question. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
How are you feeling, pal?
Good. Looking forward to fly. We can find a takeoff. Let's go.
There I was thinking pal was going to say I'm looking forward to more hiking. Oh man, what a view though. Whew. Crank it in. We're going to go up there somewhere.
Yeah, so now I remember why I showed that video. This is all to do with pacing yourself. So this was on the first day, and you can see I was like, basically I decided to follow all the pros up the hill, and I got up to the top. I got up to the main launch, and it turns out none of the other adventure people were there, so I was like, oh, I'll just follow all the pro guys up to the top of the hill. And yeah, probably lesson learned there is maybe stick with your own pace, and like even if you're feeling good, maybe just chill the hell out. Getting a bit excited is very easy to do, especially on the first couple of days. Walking and jogging with weight, probably good for the joints in terms of like building that up rather than finding that you have to like jog with something on your back at the very start of a race. Mentioned the shoes already. Food and hydration, I already mentioned that. Yeah, flying and launching and landing in unfamiliar places. So there was a question asked about top landing before. Yeah, so I guess, without, notwithstanding the top landing stuff, just being comfortable with like launching and landing in unprepared places is super, super important, and, pretty key in terms of being able to assess those places too for their safety. So yeah, you're responsible for making your own decisions and that stuff, and no one's sort of watching what you're doing in these races. So yeah, I definitely saw some people make some very questionable decisions about launches that they did with not many bailout options, because they were under pressure. They were like, oh man, I'm like coming last or whatever, like got to try and stick it with this like sketchy takeoff. Definitely have way more fun if you just don't try and do that. Oh yeah, there's video 7 there, if you want to check that on, Jeremy. You said there was a question there.
Yeah. Having 1 or 2 kilos less for hiking versus 1 or 2 liters additional water, which will you pick? How much water will you consider minimum?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so basically, would you take 1 or 2 kgs less? Actually, can I just read the thing? Oh, yeah, thanks. Oh, yeah. Having 1 or 2 kg less for hiking versus 1 or 2 litres additional water, which would you pick, and how much water would you consider minimum? So for racing on the X RedRocks, I would say it depends on the day. Some days they're actually some days they have like water refuel options, but I generally carried 2 to 3 litres of water every day, and yeah, it was just enough. I never felt like, oh man, I shouldn't have carried this 3 litres of water with me. Yeah, it definitely gets hot and you definitely drink a lot. And to the 1 or 2 kgs of gear versus, I don't know, just carry both. I don't know, if you're a bit slower, what of it? Like, yeah, I guess you want to be careful with the kit you're carrying, but yeah, it's not the end of the world. So this video, I think, was to do with taking off in unprepared places. So this was a pretty windy launch and pretty flat that I did with some other guys. So I took off first there, and yeah, I guess that's pretty typical of the sorts. That's pretty typical of the sorts of spots that you could find yourself taking off at. Some of the better pilots took off in really rocky shite, like I was walking over with Powell in that other video there. But yeah, you can find some reasonable things, but there was a like 25, the wind there was probably 25 gusting 30s, so yeah, definitely have to have solid ground handling skills to be able to control, confident in controlling your wing in that. yeah, what was the? Oh, can you take that? Whatever the window there is off. Oh yeah, got to read my cues. Yeah, so other race preparation things. So insurance is a thing, I guess, whenever you're flying overseas. Experience again from the 2024 X RedRocks from friends was that despite the fact that Global Rescue sponsors the X RedRocks, they're actually pretty useless at responding to incidents. So apparently to-go from lived experience is the way to go. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions about that stuff, I can definitely elaborate on that a bit more. But yeah, definitely you want to make sure, and these competitions usually require that you have the right insurance to make sure that if something does happen, that you have a means to get yourself properly looked after. Ground handling, that was another video. Oh yeah, this one was actually this video just on race preparation. This is a video from day 2, just before about half an hour before I took off. This is actually Aaron Duragatti taking off. Some of you might have seen this. So this is him launching, and must have launched in a cycle. Yeah, definitely managed to handle this all right. How Tonya does her tandem flights. Yeah, so some people have some slightly higher tolerances than others, but he got off out of there and flew all the way to goal, so that worked out for him. But yeah, you definitely, that's, I guess, a great example of why you need to have a pretty good idea of what you're comfortable in launching with and being able to assess conditions on unprepared sites. But the feeling when you get it right is amazing. Probably not so good if you got dragged 10 meters over the ground. Did not happen to me on the race. Funnily enough, I showed up at that launch half an hour later. They actually shut it down after that because they're like, this is way too sketchy. And I was already halfway up. I was like, screw it, I'm going up, and if I can't fly, I'm going to DNF today. And I got up there half an hour later, and it was actually pretty chill. It was just like 10 to 15k on the nose. So yeah, I got off and had a great flight. Patience, again, is a big thing. So navigation, practice with the apps. Yeah, I guess just be familiar with your offline apps and make sure you know how to navigate with them, because quite often it's a case of you can come up with all the plans you want before a race on one of these races, but on the day conditions can be different. You might end up landing somewhere you didn't expect, and being able to suss out quickly where the roads are, where the trails are, where decent launch spots are going to be from satellite imagery. That's all super handy and pretty rewarding if you can use those apps well. If you're a bit of a ninja with them and can figure something out, get to a good launch and take off and make it still happen. Packing, unpacking gear, I guess just not losing shit. Yeah, I lost heaps of stuff because I generally lose stuff at the best of times at home, so yeah, I was pretty screwed for this race. But yeah, just having a good method for like getting stuff in and out of the bag is pretty key. I was with some of the pros for a couple of the takeoffs, and they're like, basically they were taking off before I even had my wing unrolled. They can be like off in less than a minute and a half. It's friggin' incredible, and can be packed up in that time too. You don't need to be that good, but more just being organised with your stuff so you don't have it all splayed out and then having to like pick it all up. So there's some great videos on how to do that on YouTube and stuff with Kriegel, and would recommend looking into that. And also practicing on like zero wind ground handling days, practicing those forward launches and practicing like, packing your wing, unpacking it, getting that stuff tight. It's good drills to do. So if you want to go to the next slide there, Jeremy. Yeah, so during the race, tips for the race. Yeah, so cameras and flying, we already talked about that. Didn't really record anything, maybe to my detriment. There would have been some pretty good content from the air. Sticking with a crew that matches your ability. If you want to check on a video there, 5 I think it is, Jeremy. Yeah, so I guess that really came down to on day one, I basically decided to chase a bunch of pros and then ended up basically taking off up here, and they all went up and I sort of ended up slowly going down into this valley and bombing out. So the guys in my division who stayed back at the main launch all the way back down here climbed 1,500 meters less and sailed over my head about an hour later. So again, patience is a virtue that I didn't have on the first day and learned very quickly. If you want to check on video 5 there. 5, I think it was. Oh shit. It's all good. I've got Jeremy running all around the place. Oh, there you go. Sound?
How hard could it be?
Yeah, so I think that was a video from me basically... What's that? Oh, there we go.
Yes, day 1. And I've gone off trail.
What's that?
God damn it. I hope you know where you're going.
Not really.
Ah, shit. Oh, man. No other adventure class category people around, so guess I might as well follow the pros. How hard could it be?
Yeah, so it turned out to be quite hard. Spoiler alert. I think I guess that feeds into the next point of having a plan, and while deviating from the plan is always it's always good to be flexible, need to consider those plans carefully. I think that's one thing that I learned from this is definitely take a breather and just think about what you're doing before you decide to do it. Learn from the pros. How about we go video 2 there?
How are you feeling, pal?
Yeah.
Oh, I've already seen that one.
Like to fly.
Okay.
Find a takeoff.
Let's go. There I was thinking pal was going to say I'm looking forward to more hiking.
Oh, yes. What's that?
Oh, man.
Yeah, I
What a
didn't
view,
intend
though.
to have this twice.
Crank it in.
So I ended up hiking
We're gonna
right
go
up
up
to the
there
top of
somewhere.
that hill, and basically, we can skip the next video, but basically I hiked all the way up there and Paul hung out basically where I took that video, and he launched off and basically thermaled out and was blitzing down the ridge by the time I got to the top of the hill. So definitely having some pretty solid unprepared launch skills is pretty key. I decided to not hang out where they were because I wasn't comfortable with the launch that they're dealing with, and I thought it'd be better on the top, which it was a lot better. So ultimately you've got to sort of stay in your lane to an extent. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I guess that's a term that's used in a whole bunch of adventure sports, but from day one, I screwed up pretty bad and ended up bombing out and having to slope land on, in a sagebrush covered slope, and then walk 500 meters up through thick sagebush, and then lay my wing out on the top of sagebush and launch again. That was definitely not ideal, and that all came from me being a bit rushed. And I guess this applies to all things in paragliding, but particularly in competition. Second day, I took a lot more time and ended up managing to fly, and ended up winning the day. So I could have even gone slower that day. If I had have waited around another half hour, I would have ended up, being able to fly all the way to the end, and I wouldn't have had to run 20k through the desert. So slow is smooth. Stow the ego. I guess, again, that's just a general rule of paragliding, but I saw a few people taking pretty sketchy decisions, because they weren't in a place in the race that they thought that they were happy with, and decided to try and get their way out of it. Which nothing's worth taking risks like that. So yeah, just got to be prepared for that and have some fun with it. It's not all about winning. So yeah, on most of the routes I elected to take, they weren't actually the most efficient routes, but they were the coolest, I guess, in terms of seeing new terrain, walking through interesting parts and everything. So yeah, if you want to check on video 8 there.
So the race is on. Landed 15k out of goal, and now racing against the guys who've been running all day. Hopefully I can beat them. Whew. How about that view though? It's hot, but beautiful.
You also notice all those cumulus clouds around. So again, if I had waited half an hour, I probably would have been up, getting to cloud base. So yeah, that's that. Was that video 8, by the way? I thought. Oh, right. Okay, I got them a bit mixed up. Anyway, all good. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so that's basically what I was going to cover with the talking about the X RedRocks and my experience from it. And I guess I'll just give you guys a heads up of races that are upcoming that are pretty exciting. So I'm not actually sure what the name of this top one's going to be. I just made that up. Love Island Hike and Fly Edition on Vancouver Island. I don't know how much loving there's going to be, but a lot of loving of flying maybe. May or June 2025 is when it's planned, and Sam from the island is organising that. So yeah, keep an eye out for that on the chats. The Hatcher Hike and Fly is a event. Also the format of the Love Island one, I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but it sounds like it's going to be a pretty chill event at the start for the first year at least. More like just a hike and fly and, I don't know, kind of hang out thing. Hatcher Hike and Fly, an actual comp. As you might have seen at the start, there I had some screenshot of some waypoints, and yeah, that's going to be July 5th to 8th, 2025. I'm considering doing that this year. Be a pretty amazing way to explore the mountains around the sort of Denali National Park area in Alaska. And seems like generally a pretty fun time. Norm has taken on the idea of doing a Vernon-based hike and fly competition this year. Again, it's first year running it, so I think it's going to be a pretty chill event and just going to be sort of more of a discovery thing to see how many people are keen on it in this area. And then, of course, the X RedRocks is 24th to 27th of September, so a good sort of one when everything's shutting or shut down here. Things are still booming down in Utah. So yeah, they're just the ones in North America. Of course, there's a whole plethora of ones in Europe that I haven't mentioned. There's the Wanaka Hike and Fly in New Zealand. Great country, you should go there. And then there's also some other, there's a couple in Australia as well that I know of. So yeah, also, should have mentioned it before. I meant to mention it before. I was very lucky on the 2023 X RedRocks. I shared a room with Jono Climo, and he mentored me through the whole thing. He was in the pro category that year and gave me all sorts of tips about how not to massively screw it up, and having a mentor is fantastic. So my many thanks to Jono for that. And there's actually a bursary that Paraglide Canada is running in Jono's name, basically for races going forward. So in 2025, Paraglide Canada is going to sponsor a nominated pilot. So any of you can write an email to Paraglide Canada and nominate another pilot who you think would be a good candidate for getting this funding. So basically what it is $500 worth of cash to go towards race costs, and another $500 worth of gear that's given for free by Paraglide Canada. So that's a pretty amazing opportunity, and if you have anyone in mind, let me know or let Norm know. And then other tips for hike and fly comps. Just wrapping it up, this is a great resource that Kinga, oh man, I can't say her surname, Mushtalash. Thanks very much, Jeremy. Yeah, she's put together a great resource in terms of some of the finer details of just how to train for and how to prepare yourself physically for a hike and fly competition. Not super seriously, but just in a way that is going to make hiking and camping out and planning your adventure more enjoyable. So on that note, yeah, that's all I had for this presentation. If anyone's got any more questions or any more heckles about underwear that would be good to wear or any of my other clothing choices in racing or otherwise, then I'd be happy to hear them. Thanks very much, guys.